How's it going, people? Welcome back to the channel and welcome to a very interesting video. Today we're answering a question: is the Skoda Fabia a good first car? This week, I suppose, I've been in Switzerland on holiday for the first time since January the 4th, I think, and this is my hire car. It is a 2019, I think, Skoda Fabia, 5-door, very nice. And it's a really good spec as well, which I'll talk you through. And I just wanted to know, basically, is this the kind of car that you should buy as your first car? Should you not buy one as your first car? Do I think there are better first cars, etc, etc, etc? I'm rambling at this point, but as always, remember to like, comment, subscribe, all that great stuff. And without further ado, let's get into the video. So yes, this is it, the Skoda Fabia 5-door that we've been driving so far on this holiday, and it has treated us very well so far. And just for your reference, look at how stunning the view is. We are out here in Interlaken in Switzerland, and that's a great view of Interlaken over there, some mountains, and it's just the most beautiful place in the world, and I love it here. In fact, you've got some paragliders up there. But we're here to talk about the car today and not my amazing holiday that I'm having, finally. And I wanted to basically talk you guys through just how good or how bad, all the pros and all the cons and all that kind of stuff of this car, and there's plenty of stuff to talk about, so let's jump into it. So let's start at the front of the car. So compared to the old Skoda, so if you don't know, I drove a Skoda Fabia Estate as my first car. It is a much more aggressive looking front, and I'm a big fan of it, to be perfectly honest. If you didn't know as well, this is pretty much exactly the same car as the VW Polo and as the Seat Ibiza, all built on the same chassis, all with the same basic options and principles and whatever. And theoretically, Polo is supposed to be the most useful or the most, I don't know, like the best spec, but I'd say this is a pretty good spec for a Skoda. So for example, you've got these black alloys all the way around, obviously with the quite sizable and quite decent as well brakes on the front, and you've still got drums on the back. VW seem to never like to change the fact that they have discs versus drums on the rear, but the more aggressive styling on the front also is carried on throughout to the back of the car. So you've got this nice long line across the side there, which I think is quite decent, and obviously on the lower bit as well. It's not sporty or anything, but it's certainly slightly more aggressive than the old Skodas used to be, which were much more rounded, etc. Here at the rear as well, it's obviously got a little bit more angular than it used to be back in the times where I used to drive a Skoda Fabia Estate, and I think, to be perfectly honest, it does look quite good. I mean, ultimately, what can I tell you? It's a Skoda on the exterior. There's nothing amazing about it. It's not beautiful, but I think for a first car, if this was going to be your first car, it is quite good looking. I particularly like, as I mentioned, the sort of black on white. I think that's a really cool thing to have on your first car, and to be able to spec these black alloys is pretty cool. I also think the size of the car is relatively reasonable. It's not a difficult car to move around and manhandle. So yes, on balance, a good little car. I don't think it would look too out of place with you and your mates driving around. It doesn't set the world on fire, but similarly, it's not an ugly car. But the main things that have impressed me about this car have generally been on the inside, or also to do with the tech. So I think we should try and do some of those things right now. So for example, I've got the key down here in my pocket, and it has the standard keyless entry, and it also has keyless start as well. If I show you around here, it's got the engine start stop button, so keyless on all of those bits, which is quite a nice thing to have in a first car. I mean, it's just technologically advanced compared to my old Skoda was. In addition to that, you get this great little heads-up display here, which shows you what doors are open, and it also throughout the trip will tell you what's going on with the sat nav. You get quite a good infotainment system, which I'll show you in a second. There's a few problems with it in my opinion, but we'll get to those in a moment. On the rest of the interior, not regarding the tech, it's quite cheap and plasticky. Generally got the same type of materials that VW have used on all of their cheaper model cars, this kind of gross plasticky stuff. And then this looks like it should be stainless, but in reality it's just plastic. And I think that, yeah, it does a good job of looking premium, but when you feel it, it doesn't feel particularly premium. The seats are relatively comfortable. Again, I don't actually know if these have at all changed since the Skoda that I had as my first car. It's pretty much the same thing. If I'm perfectly honest, for the majority of this review, all I think is really changed is a few of the tech bits, and those worry me slightly because yes, the car is more technologically advanced, but as a first car, like any tech bits that you have tend to go wrong after a few years or after enough years. So I'd be interested to know how many bits are going to go wrong on this car. It could be interesting. But there's ample room, so as a driver there's plenty of room. The steering wheel's very nice and sturdy. It feels very nice on the actual wheel. One thing I'd say doesn't feel so nice is you've got all of these controls across the wheel here, and these feel really plasticky. Like they actually almost click when you've got your hand there. Like I've got decently sizable palms and they pretty much just foul constantly on these, but they don't click anything, but they just feel a bit gross. On the passenger side there's also plenty of room, and if I go in here as well, obviously this is the 5-door rather than the 3-door, there's still plenty of room in the back to sit in. In fact, let me jump in right here. Plenty of space for my feet. And I mean, my girlfriend's sitting quite far back at the moment, but there's also room there. Speaking of room, there is also ample space to store stuff. So you've got storage in the sides, you've got storage obviously over there as well. A very sizable glove box or glove compartment or whatever you want to call it, which no one ever put gloves in. You've obviously got some drinks holders down there, and I just basically put my keys down there and whatever. Down here as well, there's another spot to put stuff. You've also got this, which I think is actually rubbish. So yes, it is a little bit where you can do some storage inside of it, etc. But actually, I think that when you're sitting here with your arm on it, it is one of the worst feelings. Like it does, I don't know, I think these are rubbish basically. In the back, similarly, you've got a bit of storage in here and a bit of storage over there, obviously also behind the seats as well. But one thing that I think this car is missing, so if I go back in the front, on the old Skodas and the Polos and stuff, there used to be this really great tray right here that you could fit stuff into. I think that's actually a really good place for chucking stuff, and I use it all the time in my Polo. It is a bit of a shame, in my opinion, that you don't get that. Some things that you do get, however, is obviously automatic lights, and obviously you get this as well, which is to set the speed for cruise control, which is always good. And basically everything is just updated to a bog standard VW style interior with bog standard VW tech. If we come around here to the boot, it also has plenty of boot space. If we jump in here, loads of room in there to chuck stuff. I obviously had the Estate, which I thought was really helpful in terms of giving that bit of extra boot space, but this is, yeah, ample room. You don't need an Estate, I would say. This is more than enough. You also get these, which are really useful for putting in either engine oil or drinks if you're going shopping. Got this that you can hang bags off of as well to stop things rolling around in the boot, same as up there, and also in here as well. So a few spots in the boot that are actually quite useful. However, this is one of the big cons with this car in my opinion. The boot shutting is, one, really heavy, like surprisingly heavy, just wants to always go back up, and two, you never actually know if it's shut or not. So I think that is shut right there, as you'd, oh, it doesn't show in the car at the moment, but normally you'd be able to see it in the car if the car is switched on. That looks like it's shut, but sometimes we've been shutting the boot exactly like that and it's not been shut. Now, I don't know if that's a problem with this car in particular, but it seems to happen quite consistently. Sometimes the boot will be closed, sometimes it won't be, but it will look exactly the same every single time. And before we jump in and actually drive this thing, I just wanted to mention one quick thing. I don't think that VW have come very far in the last like 20-25 years in terms of cars like this. Yes, this car has way more tech than my Polo and way more tech than the other old VWs that I've driven, but ultimately it's pretty much the same thing. Like, it's got the little 1.2 engine in it, which is pretty much exactly the same as what I have in my Polo or I had in my Skoda. The interior is pretty much exactly the same. There's no real differences. It's just maybe slightly more updated to the times. It really isn't that different. It feels very much the same. It just feels normal. It felt like I was getting in my Polo, but with the steering wheel on the wrong side, sorry, of all of my European and American and everyone else viewers. Yes, it has some extra tech, but ultimately, is that worth the extra like £7,000 that you'd spend on this over just like a 2008 Polo? I'm not really sure. In fact, I've driven a 2010 plate Polo, and genuinely it had almost exactly the same features as this car. So I'm not really sure why you would go for this over something a little bit older that had depreciated a bit more and was going to cost you less up front. But I say we jump in and take you for a drive. This is a stunning mountain pass that we're on right here, so I think you guys will enjoy the drive either way, but it gives me a chance to talk through some of the other pros and cons of this car, which particularly come into their own when you're actually driving it. Okay, so let's jump into the car. First thing you'll see is I find that the steering wheel is absolutely massive. Like, it looks really big in front of you, which I think is actually quite a nice thing, particularly on a car like this. Obviously got that start stop there, got to hold the clutch in, which is new for someone like me who drives much older cars. Let's give it a little push. Just try not to run over these cyclists as we go though. But yes, let me talk you through some of the pros and cons of actually driving a car like this. So let's start with one of the basics. The sat nav I think is actually not very good. It's fine, like it does the job and it tells you what the speed limit is and does that kind of stuff, but it's not very clear and you can't actually zoom in very close on it. I'm just pointing it right there, as you can see. You can't actually zoom in very close. You don't really know what's going on at any one time. It's not like an iPhone or Apple Maps or whatever, or Android or whatever it is that you use, where you can actually see a little bit more. This seems a little bit rubbish. It tells you what you're doing though, so ultimately it's good. That's pretty mad, isn't it? On top of that as well, one thing that I'd say is that obviously as a first car, they're generally uneventful, but this one is particularly uneventful. It's a very smooth drive. It's very comfortable for passengers. It's a very nice and gentle and friendly car to drive, but it's very uneventful. It's got no power. Like genuinely, this thing is as slow as my old Skoda or as slow as Penny, and Penny only costs 400 quid. Like I'm flat out on the throttle here in second gear and we're going nowhere. It's just, it doesn't have any pickup. I'm flat out in second gear. I know we're climbing a hill, but it feels like it should be going somewhere and it just isn't. I think the 0 to 60 on these is something like 16 seconds or whatever, so I appreciate that they're not cars that are made to go fast and I'm giving it an unfair review on that kind of point. But still, there are first cars that you can get that will have much better 0 to 60s. If you can get a 0 to 60 sub 13, sub 10 seconds even, which I've shown on many of my videos you can get and can get insured on, I'd probably prefer that. This is just a little bit too slow. And the problem with it being too slow is not just that it's slow, because I actually quite like driving slow cars because it gives you a bit more of a focus on learning to drive faster around corners, but the handling in this is also rubbish. There is so much body roll. Basically, in my old Skoda Fabia Estate, it used to have shed loads of body roll because it was a big car relative to this. It was longer and there was just too much body for the wheelbase. This has just enough body for the wheelbase, and yet I still get so much body roll. We're coming up to a few tighter corners in a second, and genuinely, it just doesn't even feel like it's just rubbish. Like I'm turning in here and I'm leaning all the way over, and I'm doing this smoothly as well, and then we're back over again. The car just rolls and rolls and rolls, and so that I find to be a little bit underwhelming, shall we say. The entertainment system is really good. The sound of this is actually quite good. It's a good speaker system. Generally VW do really good speaker systems. I know I'm saying VW a lot, by the way, and I appreciate it's a Skoda, but it is literally just a VW, so that's what I feel about it. Look at that view. Absolutely stunning. This is why you come and drive roads like this. And this is why I'm missing my Mazda. I wish I was out here in my Mazda, but that was just not possible thanks to the quarantine in France. One thing that I find particularly rubbish is the gearbox. So I know I'm on the wrong side for myself, but I'm fine driving cars like with the steering wheel on the left-hand side. The gearbox, it feels like every gear is miles away. Like second to third feels like a whole mile away from each other, and then third to fourth still feels like miles away too. And these tight corners, again, as I was saying on the handling, the car just does not handle at all nicely, even at low speed. So slight issue, and again, a stunning view over there. But yes, the gearbox, it just feels like every gear is labored. It feels like I'm changing gears on a classic car where you have to really like put the car into gear every single time. You can't just like throw the car from gear to gear. It's always like a very real, like you have to do it all yourself. In the Polo, in the Mazda, in a whole bunch of other manual cars that I've driven, you can literally just shift and shift and shift, and it does not feel like you can do that in this car. And by the way, I know it probably feels like I'm saying a lot of bad things about the car right now. As an overall, if we just take it back for a moment, I do really like the car. I think there are so many positives about it as well. So for example, the fact that it is such a smooth car to drive, it gives you a lot of confidence. It makes you feel like everything's quite comfortable. There's like almost no noise from the exterior of the car. Like the sound deadening in here is amazing. You can't hear the engine barely at all. You can't hear any cars coming past you. I find that really strange coming from a lot of older cars into a newer car. In addition to that, the fuel economy is exceptional. When we got the car in Geneva a few days ago, well, more than a few days ago now, we had a full tank of fuel, and we are still not even down to a quarter of a tank. We're still going, and we are 448 kilometers into our journey so far. So the fuel economy is really good, and I've not been bombing it around or anything, but I haven't also been driving it slowly. I've just been driving it normally, and we've managed to eke out this much without even getting close to an empty tank. Also, I mean, for a first car, it's always nice to have a good infotainment system, and I do genuinely think that all of this stuff is really cool to have in your first car. The air conditioning is really nice. All the little features that you get are all very nice little features, so like the keyless entry, the keyless start, all that good stuff. It is all very nice. but is it worth £6,000 or £7,000 more? No. It's simply not worth the extra money. I don't know why you would pay extra for all of these little amenities for the sake of being able to get into your car without using the key, or being able to start the car without using the key, or because you get a slightly better sat nav when everyone has a mobile phone with a sat nav on it anyway. There's so many extra little techie bits in the car which if for a first car, I'm talking about here, for a first car, I don't think they're necessary. You would do better to spend £2,000 on your first car and just enjoy it and do all of the features and stuff yourself, and not have to think about all these extra tech bits that could potentially go wrong at some point down the line. They would do absolutely fine, in my opinion. I don't really see why you need all of this extra tech. It is, yeah, as I say, nice, but do you need it? No. I also don't think if you get one of these, even though I said it does actually look quite nice on the exterior and it is quite nice on the interior, none of it's an event. So if you're after a first car that's going to be a head turner or interesting, or that people will look at and think, oh, that's mad, then this isn't the right one for you. If you're looking for a first car that has personality and a soul and you can like love it and abuse it and do all that kind of stuff to it, this again isn't the first car for you, because it's too expensive to do all of those things and it's just going to depreciate as you own it. Basically, yes, great first car in terms of its usability and whatever, but for the actual things that I think people look for in their first cars, it's a bit boring. It's kind of first car that your parents would buy you, rather than a car that you actively looked at and were like, oh yeah, I'll buy that and have that as my first car. That's my opinion on it. So I know this has been a bit all over the place, this video, but to kind of answer the question, if you're after a safe, a comfortable, a practical, a reliable, a usable, a decent, a spacious first car, a technologically advanced first car, 100%, this is an excellent first car. If you're after all of those things for a fraction of the price and not quite as good, but maybe slightly more personality or slightly more head turning and that kind of stuff, then no, it's not a good first car. But I have to preface all of that with the fact that it's a Skoda Fabia, and as a Skoda Fabia was my first car, this is the best first car you can buy on the planet, hands down. There's a couple more points I need to speak about, and I feel like, by the way, I've been very harsh in this, but we'll get onto that in a moment. One of them is what this car is like on motorways. It's very comfortable. It's definitely more stable and strong than any of the older first cars that I've driven. It just feels very smooth and very capable on a motorway, and that is definitely to its positive. We did about 250 motorway kilometers in the car, and that was perfect. It did it absolutely perfectly. It had no issues. In cities, as you're about to see, or in towns, it's also quite good for town driving generally. It's not too big, as I mentioned, so it's not like you're lugging around a massive mass, but I do find it a little bit difficult in terms of the lack of pickup. It feels like when you're first coming off of the clutch, it's very slow to pick up, but then as soon as you kind of get through the revs a little bit, then it wants to go. So like if I show you here, it feels like it's slow and then it zips, so if that makes any sense. I don't know if you can catch that as well on camera, but at the first bit it was very slow off the line. You'd otherwise have to get the revs up quite high to get it to move, and I just feel like that's a little bit less than perfect when you're trying to zip out of a nice little corner or whatever. That does slightly annoy me. And yes, I do feel like I've been maybe unnecessarily harsh. I didn't mean to be harsh on this review of this car. I do genuinely like it, and I do genuinely believe that it will be a good first car, but it will be a good first car in maybe 10 years time, is what I'm thinking. Like the cars that were made 10 years ago to be first cars are coming to become good first cars now. I think this is doing exactly the same thing. I feel like right now it's overpriced for what you're getting. You're basically getting the same stuff you would have got in a first car 10 years ago, just with a few extra little technical bits. So yeah, I feel like this would be a great first car in 10 years time, but for right now, I don't think it's that great a first car. It could be a lot. You could get the same kind of stuff for a lot less money, is what I'm trying to say. So yeah, wait 10 years, watch this review in 10 years time. It'll be an excellent first car, assuming the reliability is held up. And before we end this video, there is one more thing that I want to show you, but it requires me to get into a parking space. So just give me 2 seconds. So this is kind of the make or break of this car for me, and it's most certainly a break. So I love parking. Parking's one of my favorite things to do. I love flexing on people with good parallel parking in particular, but we're going to go into this bay park now, and I'm going to show you what happens when I try and park, right? So let's just go in nice and slow. You get the parking pilot assist will pop up in a moment, and it will start harassing me. And it's so loud. It is so ridiculously loud. Shut up! I'm not even moving. And then you turn this, and then it stops, okay? But it's only for right now. If I did it again, it would start up again. What's the point? You don't need to beep that hard at me. If I can see it on the screen, or if I can see it in front of me, allow it, man. So for that reason, don't buy this car as a first car, because that is so annoying. But anyway, yes, sorry for a particularly harsh review in many aspects. It wasn't supposed to be a harsh review of this car. Genuinely, I do like it. It will be a great first car in 5 to 10 years time when it's depreciated in value and it's not going to cost you 7 or 8 grand in depreciation. But until then, just buy something cheaper and enjoy it to the same degree, and then absolutely smash the life out of it if it has this annoying beep. That beep really, really does annoy me. But as always, a massive thanks to the patrons for all their support. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, all that great stuff. And thank you very much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.
Listen.